It started as just another contemplative night on The Tonight Show, until Keanu Reeves heard something that made him stop mid-sentence and changed everything forever. Studio 6B had that distinctive energy tonight. Keanu Reeves was back to discuss his latest film, bringing zen-like peace to the usually frenetic pace of late-night television. The New York City skyline glittered through the studio's windows, creating a perfect backdrop for another thoughtful conversation about art, life, and philosophy. The audience was unusually quiet, showing the respectful attention that came when people sensed they were in the presence of someone genuinely special. Jimmy had been looking forward to this interview for weeks. Conversations with Keanu always went deeper than typical promotional appearances, touching on themes of loss, resilience, and finding meaning in life. What nobody noticed during the pre-show excitement was Frank Castellano, 67 years old, in row 6, seat 9. He sat perfectly still in his worn leather jacket, clutching a set of motorcycle keys with a small silver cross charm and a faded photo of a young man attached. Frank had won his tickets through a radio station contest. His daughter Maria had been encouraging him to get out more, to find ways to honor his son's memory that didn't involve sitting alone in the garage. "Papa," Maria had said gently, "Michael wouldn't want you to stop living. He'd want you to ride again." Michael, Staff Sergeant Michael Castellano, 28 years old, killed by a drunk driver while riding home from his welcome back party. 3 tours in Afghanistan survived, only to die 15 minutes from home. The show opened with Jimmy's usual warmth. When he introduced Keanu, the applause was sustained, but respectful, 200 people showing genuine appreciation. Keanu walked onto the stage in his characteristic all-black attire, settling into the guest chair with relaxed presence. "Keanu Reeves, everybody," Jimmy said, settling behind his wooden desk. "Thank you so much for being here. I have to start by saying, every time you're on the show, we end up having these conversations that go way beyond movies. You have this way of making people think about life differently." Keanu smiled gently. "When you've experienced loss, you realize that surface-level stuff isn't what matters. What matters is connection, authenticity, the courage to be vulnerable with each other." As Keanu spoke, his eyes naturally scanned the audience with genuine curiosity. That's when he heard it, a soft metallic jingling sound. His eyes found the source, Frank, in row 6, unconsciously fidgeting with motorcycle keys. Keanu's storytelling rhythm shifted slightly. Something about the older man's posture, the way he held those keys like they contained the secrets of the universe, the careful reverence in his movements, spoke to Keanu in a language that went beyond words. "Actually, Jimmy," Keanu said, his voice taking on that contemplative tone that signaled he was about to go somewhere unexpected, "I'm hearing something in the audience that's making me think about one of my favorite subjects." Jimmy looked curious but patient. He'd learned to trust these moments when Keanu followed his instincts. Keanu stood up and walked toward the edge of the stage, his eyes finding Frank again. "Sir," the gentleman in row 6 in the leather jacket, "I couldn't help but notice you have motorcycle keys. Are you a rider?" Frank looked around frantically, pointing to himself with confusion. The audience turned to look at him, and he felt his face flush with surprise. "Yes, you," Keanu said gently, his voice carrying that characteristic warmth that made strangers feel like old friends. "I ride too. There's something about the sound of keys, the ritual of it all. What kind of bike do you have?" Frank slowly stood up, his legs slightly unsteady. He held up the keys, and even from the stage, Keanu could see they were attached to something more than just a keychain. "I have a 1998 Harley Sportster," Frank said, his voice carrying clearly through the studio. "But I haven't ridden it in 3 years." Keanu's expression shifted, becoming more focused. 3 years is a long time to keep a bike parked. What's the story there? Frank looked down at the keys in his hands, then back up at Keanu. When he spoke, his voice was strong but heavy with emotion. The bike belonged to my son, Michael. He died in a motorcycle accident 3 years ago. I keep the keys because they're all I have left of our rides together. The studio fell completely silent. Even the Roots stopped their gentle background music. Jimmy felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't an interview anymore. This was about to become something much more profound. Your son was a writer too, Keanu said softly. Not really a question, but an understanding. Since he was 16, Frank said, tears starting to form in his eyes. We used to ride together every Sunday. He'd come back from deployment, and the first thing we'd do was get on our bikes and just ride. He said it was the only time he felt truly free. Keanu felt something break open inside his chest. He'd lost people he loved, knew the weight of grief, understood the way objects could hold the entire essence of someone who was no longer there. Frank, Keanu said, would you mind if I came up there and talked with you about Michael? I have a feeling he was pretty special. Jimmy immediately understood what was happening. Keanu, go, he said without hesitation. Keanu Reeves left the stage and walked into the audience. The cameras followed him, but everyone understood this wasn't about creating good television. Keanu reached Frank's row, and the people around them shifted to make space. He sat down in the empty seat next to Frank, and for a moment, two men who understood something about loss sat together in the middle of a talk show audience. Tell me about Michael, Keanu said simply. Frank's composure broke completely. He was a Marine, 3 tours in Afghanistan. He came home different each time, but the bike always brought him back to himself. We'd ride for hours without talking. Keanu nodded, understanding. What was the last ride you took together? The day before he died, Frank whispered. We rode up the coast 200 miles. He told me about this girl he'd met, how he wanted to teach his children to ride the way I taught him. Behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that would define this moment forever. He walked down from the stage and joined Keanu and Frank in the audience, abandoning every protocol of television production. Frank, Jimmy said gently, kneeling in the aisle beside their row. Why haven't you been able to ride since then? Frank looked at the keys in his hands, then at Keanu, then at Jimmy. Every time I think about getting on that bike, I remember that last conversation, all his plans, his dreams, everything he was going to do. And I think, how can I experience something he'll never get to experience again? Keanu reached over and gently placed his hand on Frank's arm. Frank, can I share something with you? I've lost people I loved too, and for a long time, I thought honoring them meant stopping the things we did together, stopping the joy we shared, as if continuing would somehow diminish their memory. The studio was completely quiet now, everyone hanging on every word. But then I realized something, Keanu continued. The people we love don't want us to stop living. They want us to live more fully. They want us to carry their dreams forward, not abandon our own. Frank was crying openly now, but he was listening with an intensity that suggested Keanu's words were reaching something deep inside him. Those keys you're holding, Keanu said, they're not just metal. They're a connection to every ride you and Michael ever took, every conversation, every moment of freedom you shared on 2 wheels. Jimmy felt tears forming in his own eyes. This was why he loved live television, for moments like this when real human connection happened in front of everyone. Frank, Keanu said, what would Michael say if he could see you right now, holding his keys but not riding his bike? Frank actually smiled through his tears. He'd probably tell me to stop being such a stubborn old man. He always said I overthought everything. He'd say, Dad, sometimes you just have to twist the throttle and see where the road takes you. Sounds like he was wise, Keanu said. How old was he when you first taught him to ride? 16, Frank replied immediately. Scared out of his mind, but determined. He stalled that bike 20 times in the first hour, but he wouldn't give up. And what did you tell him when he was frustrated? Keanu asked. Frank's eyes lit up with the memory. I told him that every rider falls down. The difference between a rider and everyone else is that riders get back up and try again. Keanu nodded slowly. Frank, I think Michael is still trying to teach you that lesson. The observation hung in the air like a prayer. Jimmy watched as something shifted in Frank's expression. Recognition, understanding, maybe even hope. You know what I want to do? Keanu said suddenly. I want to make you a promise, Frank. But first, I need to ask you something. Do you still have Michael's bike? It's in my garage, Frank said, covered up, but I keep it maintained. Change the oil, keep the battery charged. I tell myself it's in case Maria wants to learn to ride. But really, I just can't bear the thought of selling it. Keanu smiled. Frank, I want to come ride with you. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. I want to take that ride that Michael would want you to take. Frank looked stunned. You do that? I'd be honored, Keanu said. Because I think when we ride together, Michael will be there too. Not as a memory, but as part of the wind, part of the road, part of the freedom that made him who he was. Keanu reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small and silver, a simple keyring with a worn medallion. This is from my first motorcycle, Keanu said. I've carried it for 20 years. It's my reminder that every ride is a gift, every mile is a prayer. He gently placed the keyring with Frank's keys. Now you have something from Michael and something from me. When you ride, you'll be carrying both of our spirits. The audience erupted in applause. But it wasn't entertainment applause. It was recognition applause, acknowledgement of something sacred that had happened in front of everyone. But there was one more thing Keanu wanted to say. He turned to address the entire studio. Frank, I want everyone here to understand something. You're not just a father who lost his son. You're a man who's choosing to honor his son's memory by living the dreams they shared together. He looked directly into the main camera. How many of you have something you've stopped doing because someone you loved can't do it anymore? How many of you are holding keys to dreams you think you're not allowed to pursue? The studio was silent. The people we love don't want us to stop, Keanu continued. They want us to ride. They want us to carry their dreams forward and create new ones in their honor. Jimmy returned to the stage, but he didn't try to transition back to normal show business. Instead, he did something unprecedented. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Tonight, we learned something important from Frank Castellano and his son, Michael. We learned that the best way to honor someone's memory isn't to stop living. It's to start living more fully. Keanu added his own message, still sitting with Frank. And we learned that sometimes the most important journeys aren't about reaching a destination, they're about having the courage to turn the key and start the engine. Frank Castellano returned home to New Jersey the next day, but he left New York with something he hadn't had in 3 years: permission to live again. That weekend, for the first time since Michael's death, he pulled the cover off the Sportster, turned the key, and felt the engine rumble to life. 2 weeks later, Keanu kept his promise. He flew to New Jersey, and he and Frank took a 300-mile ride up the coast, the same route Frank and Michael used to take every Sunday. They rode mostly in silence, but it was the kind of silence that speaks volumes about healing, about friendship, about the way shared experiences can bridge any gap. During that ride, Frank finally understood what Michael had been trying to tell him, that love doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to express itself. The dreams we share with the people we love become our responsibility to fulfill. 6 months later, Frank started teaching motorcycle safety courses at his local community college. He called the program Ride with Purpose, dedicating every class to Michael's memory and the idea that life is meant to be lived fully. Keanu attended the first graduation ceremony, telling the new riders something that became the program's motto: every ride is a prayer, every mile is a gift, and every moment on two wheels is a celebration of being alive. The motorcycle keys that started it all became something of a legend. Frank had them mounted in a display case in his garage, next to photos of every ride he'd taken since that night on The Tonight Show. But the real treasure wasn't the keys themselves. It was the understanding that sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone you've lost is to keep living the dreams you shared together. Keanu kept his promise in other ways too. He established a scholarship fund for children of fallen service members who wanted to learn motorcycle safety. And every year, on the anniversary of Michael's death, he and Frank take that same coastal ride, not as a memorial to loss, but as a celebration of love that transcends death. And Jimmy Fallon learned something that changed how he approached every interview. Sometimes the most important conversations happen not with the famous guest, but with the person in the audience who's carrying keys to dreams they think they're not allowed to pursue anymore. The Tonight Show episode featuring Frank and Michael's story became one of the most watched segments in the show's history, reminding millions of viewers that everyone has some dream they've abandoned because someone they loved can't share it anymore. The most important change was in Frank himself. He learned that grieving doesn't mean stopping. It means carrying love forward in new ways, understanding that sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do for someone you've lost is to live fully enough for both of you. The Harley Sportster in Frank's garage isn't covered anymore. It sits ready, polished, and maintained, waiting for the next ride. And every Sunday, Frank takes it out and rides those familiar roads, feeling Michael's presence not as a ghost from the past, but as a companion for the journey ahead. Because that's what love does. It doesn't create empty garages or abandoned dreams. It creates new reasons to turn the key, new purposes for the journey, and new understanding that sometimes the most sacred thing you can do is simply keep moving forward, carrying the dreams of those you love into every mile of road ahead. It wasn't just late-night television that night. It was a masterclass in how to honor loss by embracing life, how to carry forward the dreams of those we love, and how sometimes the most healing thing you can do is simply have the courage to turn the key and see where the road leads. Sometimes we live the dreams our children can't finish.